Ramesh, where are you? Is that a
No.
is that an airport?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Hey, very nice. The sun's there.
Yeah.
Today we're gonna start Nun Zayin Amid Beis. See that? Nun Zayin Amid Beis. 57B, right? And we're gonna start from the bottom. It says Lema Kafas Kalaresh Tanahi. So we thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. And in the course of our learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. So we say, if we had a discussion like this, that you're not allowed to cut off payas, but let's say you cut everything the same size. So it's not like just cutting off the payas. The whole head, all the hair on the head was cut. So is that a prohibition of cutting off payas? If you get a number one on from the machine, a buzzer. So is that a problem? Well, it goes like this. It's a machlekes tanaim. The Gemara is suggesting. The Tana Rabbana was taught in the brisa. We're gonna have two brises, and we're gonna claim that each one holds a different way. It says Raishai. Pasuk in regarding the Mitzvah says that on the seventh day he should shave all his hair, his head, his beard, his eyebrows, and all his hair he should shave. He wash his clothing and wash his body, and he'll be pure.
So they shave.
So it's when it says all his hair, it really included everything.
Right.
Then it goes on to say his head. So why do I need to say his head if you already said all his hair? So it says Raishai Mat Talmud Laimar. Why does it have to say his head? Well, if you want a chumash, Naftali, on the top shelf. It says the 5 books, the blue ones. Now, it's Vayikra Yudalid Pasuk Tes. That's the pasuk that I wrote down for myself. It says Lefisha Nemar, because I have another pasuk that says Leisa Kifa Pasra Sheichem, that you're not allowed to cut the. It means to make a circle haircut around his head to cut the payas off. So Yachalaf Mitzayra Kain. Maybe when we have to cut the hair of the Mitzayra, you should not be allowed to cut the payas. Maybe you should cut all the hair but the payas. Yeah. So Talmud Laimar, Reishai, verse 9.
All his hair.
All his hair.
And his head.
His head, comma, his beard, and his eyebrows. Comma,
Right.
and you should shave off all his visible hair. All his hair. They have a lot of things in
So there's too many details there. So what the Gemara is asking, what do you need all those details for? If you said all the hair, that means all the hair. It says, well, I wouldn't have necessarily said that all the hair means all the hair, because I could have thought that maybe all the hair means excluding the payas, because they have another prohibition that says you're not supposed to cut payas. The Talmud Laimar Reishai, the pasuk says no, you're supposed to cut the payas.
It's
Totally off because he's right, all the hair. So therefore, this teaches me that the payas have to be cut.
This will have not arms.
We'll see that tomorrow, I think, regarding the other hair.
All the hair.
Yeah, like a razor haircut. However, I have another brisa. This brisa uses the same pasuk, and it says Reishai. By the Mitzvah, it says you have to cut his hair. He cut the hair on his head. Why does it have to say that? Now, we already learned that to tell me not to pay us, that you cut the payas as well. But this brisa doesn't say that. This brisa says Lefishin Emergabi Nazir, because by a Nazir I have a pasuk that says Tarla Yavral Reishai. You shouldn't cut the hair of his head. A Nazir, it's not let us shave. He has to not let him get a haircut. He has to wait for 30 days before he gets his haircut. let's say he becomes a Mitzvah. Let's say the Nazir becomes, at the end of the month, but let's say in the middle of the month, he becomes a Mitzvah. Gets tzara. So the rule was that he has to shave his head and then wait 30 days. He doesn't count those days, right? But he has to, well, that was the discussion, if it's a short one or a long one or something. But then, we said that he has to shave his head and then let it grow again. So he's shaving his head. When he's shaving his head, but it's a violation for a Nazir to shave his head. I know he's a Mitzvah now, but he's also a Nazir. So how is he allowed to do that? It says Tali Aval Reishi, Yachalaf Nazir Mitzvah. Maybe the Nazir would not be allowed to shave even when he's a Mitzvah. Talmud Lema Reishi, Pasuk says no, the Mitzvah shaves the hair on his head. Okay. Now, what's interesting here is that one brisa understood that Reishi was telling me that you're allowed to cut the payas. The other brisa tells me that Reishi is telling me that the Nazir is allowed to cut his hair. How come the second brisa wasn't concerned about cutting payas? I'll tell you the answer. The answer is that because he's cutting all the hair on his head, that's not a prohibition of cutting payas. Cutting payas is only if you only cut the payas.
Did it talk about what exactly is cutting, like is trimming cutting? Because I know
It's going to say on the next page that we're talking about a razor. Talking about cutting it all the way down. Well, what it says now is my love, is it not? Tanai, that it's a machlekes tanayim, machlekes, it's an argument between these two brises. When you say
These prices are based on the same pasuk.
they're based on the same pasuk, each one is teaching me something else. Why is it not teaching me the same thing? Because there's a machlekes over here. If cutting payas applies when you're cutting all the hair on the head. So it's L'man Amar Mi Nazir, the one that says that it's coming to tell me that a Nazir has to cut his hair when he's a Mitzvah. Thank you. That's because he holds that payas is not a problem, because when you cut all the hair on the head, that's not an issue of payas. So what's the pasuk telling me? The pasuk is telling me that the Nazir is allowed to cut the hair on his head, even though that's a violation of a negative commandment and it's a violation of a positive commandment. The negative commandment is a razor shall not pass over his head. Positive commandment is that he should grow his hair wild. The Nazir is supposed to grow his hair. So we have two commandments there. And nevertheless, nevertheless, an asay of a Mitzvah pushes off a leis asay and an asay of a Nazir. Unbelievable. Usually we don't have this.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. Usually we don't have this, but we have a special pasuk that tells me to do that. The other opinion holds. 1 second, you forget about the Nazir. You're not allowed to cut the hair because of payas, even though you're cutting all the hair. Greda means alone.
What's the exact prohibition of using a razor? Is it shaving just the beard with the razor, or is it just any part of the head?
No, you're allowed to shave. You're allowed to use a razor on the head. It's just the beard that has a problem.
There's no violation there with the razor.
But the payas would be a problem.
The payas is considered the beard or the head?
The payas is considered the head. It's two separate prohibitions. There's the payas, and then there's the beard. Two. When it comes to getting a haircut, there's potentially two violations there.
What did you say Greda means?
Greda means alone. Alone, levad. The Greda could also mean scraping. Yeah. It's the same word. Now, it may be associated that Greda means that you're leaving it there alone, but I don't think so. I think Goyred means to scrape away. So, and Greda also means alone. I'm not sure the relationship between the two translations.
ALON.
Yeah.
So when it says no razor shall come upon his head, it's just referring to the beard?
No, it's referring to the whole head. You're talking about the Nazir. The Nazir is not allowed to cut his head, cut his hair. He's not allowed to cut all the hair on. He's not allowed to cut any hair on his head. He's a Nazir. But now he's a Mitzvah, he has to. So we say that he's allowed to cut the hair on his head, even though he's a Nazir and he's not allowed to. Because the Mitzvah pushes off that the rules of the Nazir.
So there's two statements. One is using a razor on the head, and the other is using a razor on the beard.
Yeah, but the beard, wait for the beard. The beard's coming up. Right now, we have an extra verse that says that the Metzora cuts the hair on his head. And it's either teaching me that a Nazir is allowed to cut off, I'm sorry, that a Metzora has to cut the hair on his head. It's either teaching me that the Metzora cuts off his payas, or it's teaching me that a Metzora that's a Nazir is allowed to take a haircut, even though normally he's not allowed. Okay, now, how did we explain the machlokes? Well, the one that says that it's teaching me that a Nazir is going to get a haircut, even though he usually doesn't, is because he's not concerned about payas, because you're cutting all the hair on the head. The one that says that it's a concern of payas, he holds that cutting all the hair on the head is still a concern of payas. That's what we were looking for when we started this Gemara. It said, Lema, Hakafas Kalaresh Tanaihi. We have two brises. Turns out that one brisa holds like that cutting all the hair on the head is a prohibition of payas. And the other one says it's not a prohibition of payas. Well, so lav greda means a negative prohibition alone. Lav greda, negative. Okay. Amar Rava. Rava says, not necessarily are these two brises arguing about what you think they're arguing about. Kuli alm, everyone really holds that kafas kalaresh leishmi kafa. Everyone holds that you're allowed to cut all the hair on your head, including cutting off the payas. A lot of times these these workout people that into workouts, they always have like no hair. They cut off all the hair. I guess because of sweat, whatever. So they struggle with the payas. Yeah. So, but if they cut all the hair on the head, according to this opinion, which it would be okay. According, Rava says everyone holds that cutting all the hair on the head is not a problem of payas. This is Daf Yomi, it's not a halacha share. So, what's the pasuk telling me? Why does it have to tell me that don't worry, you can cut all the hair on your head and cut off the payas? But if it's no prohibition, so why does it have to tell me that it's a problem? Why does it have to tell me that I'm allowed to if there was never a problem in the first place? So it explains like this. What's the pasuk coming? Going, for example, where do you start a haircut from? Start in the front or you start in the back? This guy is going to start from the payas. So he's going to cut off the payas first. Cuts the payas off first. That's a problem because he cuts the payas off before the rest of the head. So you're right, cutting all the hair on the head wouldn't be a problem. But cutting the payas first and then the rest of the hair is a problem. And then he cuts the rest of that. Now, since the comment on the side of my Gemara says that you take this out. Take out these words. Since if he would have cut it all at the same time, it wouldn't be a prohibition. So therefore, also when he's cuts the payas first, and the rest of the hair, it's also no prohibition. Anyway, whether we read that or not, the idea here is that there was potentially a violation that a Metzora could violate if he cuts all the hair on his head, and that is if he does the payas first. That could have been a prohibition, and therefore the pasuk tells me that don't worry about it; it's not a problem. It means you're allowed to start the haircut from the payas.
Because he's misasek in a mitzvah.
Yeah.
Wherever he begins, right?
That's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like. You know, no trophies
He's
and
involved in a mitzvah wherever he begins. And it's like Shabbos Aveda. You pick up an Aveda to return, and at the moment you're taking control of something you could be charged with stealing, but you're involved in the mitzvah of returning.
Well, it depends on your intention.
On the intention on the
Yeah.
subject, but here his intention is to shave
It's to shave everything.
Would be a mitzvah,
Right.
so what does it matter where he begins? Hard enough.
If you
Okay. ran out of trophies.
I got a cookie.
Remember,
I got a cookie.
what there was a Mendy and the Golem joke where Mendy comes home with a test, and Rabbi Klein you have the Mendy and the Golem. So Rabbi Klein says, Mendy, is this a 0 on your test? He says, no, it's a moon. My teacher ran out of stars. Okay, so this is where we're holding. We're holding where we have a new machlekes here. It's not about if shaving all the head is considered a violation. Everyone holds shaving all the head is not a violation. So why did that one brisa tell me that it is a violation? Because you started in the wrong place. The Gemara has a problem with this. It says, "Mikasaf karahachi." Does the pasuk really write like that? Does the pasuk tell me that there could be a case where there would be a violation, and therefore we have to tell you that you can do this? From Reish Lakish, 1 second. We have a statement from Reish Lakish. Kol makom shatam maitzia say say, if you have a contradiction between a positive command versus a negative command, if you're able to fulfill them both, good. If not, the asay should push off the leisasay. So 1 second. Since you could cut the hair in a different way, there should be a clear rule that you have to cut the hair. First, cut everything else, and then cut the payas. So otherwise, you'll be a violation. So why is the pasuk telling me that it's permissible? You should do it the other way. Ella, we adjust what Rava said. Rava said everyone holds cutting all the hair on the head is not a problem. And nevertheless, the pasuk is telling me that he's allowed to do it. Why does he need to tell me he's allowed to? Well, maybe he'll do it in the wrong order. We're adjusting that. The kuli al makav's color exactly the opposite. Everyone holds that cutting all the hair on the head is exactly the problem. That's a prohibition of payas. You're not allowed to get a 0 or a number 1 haircut, even if it's going over the whole head. Number 2 is already acceptable because you can grab the hair. You have to be able to grab the hair.
Right.
So the problem is to remove all the payas. It doesn't say you have to leave them long. The reason why people leave them long is hiddur mitzvah, is to beautify the mitzvah. Because it's of school or because it's cool?
It's cool.
It's cool. Okay. So my kids have a book, all the things you can do with payas. It's this kid's upshandish book. And you see a kid like swinging from a tree by his payas. So everyone holds that it's a problem to cut all the hair. So why do we have one brisa that says that the reason why the Mitzayret is the instructions by the Mitzayret is to cut all the hair and the hair on his head? Why does he have to have that extra instruction to cut also the hair on his head? If he's not allowed to cut the payas, then it would clearly be telling me that he's allowed to cut the payas. Why do I have one brisa that tells me that a Nazir is allowed to cut the hair on his head? What about the payas? It's a clear violation that you should teach me that first, that you're allowed to cut the payas. Lav Gredaminale. How is he jumping over to a Nazir when he never even taught me that he's allowed to cut the payas? Where does he know a Lav Greda, the Lav alone, the negative prohibition alone of cutting the payas? So he says, oh, the negative prohibition itself, I don't need Roishay to teach that to me. The negative prohibition of cutting payas, I can learn from somewhere else. What's the other place? Yalaf Migadilim. I learn it from Tzitzis. Damar Kra, because I have a pasuk that says, like Silbashatnas. Pasuk says, don't wear wool and linen together, a garment of wool and linen. Vitanya in the Brisa says, Leisil Bashatnas, Hagadilim Tasalach Meham. Don't wear wool and linen together, but you make tzitzis from them. In other words, you can have a linen garment, a linen garment with woolen strings. So you see that you're allowed to violate a negative prohibition in order to fulfill a positive. So since the negative prohibition is don't cut the payas, the positive prohibition is cut off all the hair because he's a mitzvah. The positive command, cut off all the hair because he's a mitzvah. So I know already that he has to cut off the payas. I don't need Rashi to teach me that. So what is Rashi teaching me? That if he's a Nazir, he's allowed to cut all his hair, even though over there was a negative and a positive. The negative was a razor should not go on his head. Positive, he should grow his hair wild. Nevertheless, he's allowed to cut it off. Okay. Manda nafkala mirashe, my time nafkala migdilim. 1 second. Once you introduce the law of tzitzis, that a negative prohibition is pushed off because of a positive. So why do I need Rashi to teach me that? I already have it from tzitzis. Amalah, so that brisa that says that I learned from Rashi that a mitzvah cuts the payas off his head, a positive command pushes off a negative. He says I can't learn from tzitzis because I use the pasuk of tzitzis for something else. Look at the Rava Udas. It's coming to tell me something that Rava says. The Rava Rami. This is we had in Masechta Shabbos, in Yevamis as well. Rava posed a contradiction. Rami means to throw, but it means he threw two things one against each other. So it means he made it. Presented a contradiction. Like Rami cube is to throw.
Where exactly?
You throw the dice, cube the dice. Kubia, Masachik Kubia, Kubia is dice. The Rami cube is a cube. You throw the dice.
Where do we know that we can make?
I may be totally wrong, but it's. Oh wow! This is like Mary Poppins. What else do you have in your bag? Very nice. Wow, fancy. Is this for me?
Yeah.
Do I have to wait till I get home? Okay. So he has a contradiction. You put on the corners of the garment. Put on the tzitzis of the kanaf, sil tchelas. You put on because the tchelas has to be wool. And the garment is allowed to be linen. So you put it on the tzitzis hakanaf, sil tchelas. And it says, what does that mean, hakanaf? It says, min hakanaf, sil tchelas. The same thing that you made the garment out of, that's what you make the tzitzis out of.
The whole garment of the tzitzis can be wool too.
Yeah. Now, what it means is like this. That you use the whatever you made the garment out of, that's what you make the tzitzis out of. But then I have another pasuk. It says wool and linen together. Okay, Tzad, how could you do this? Now, I think what the Gemara is saying that you're allowed to use any material to make the tzitzis. Well, the only thing is that whatever material you use, let's say you use silk or cotton. Whatever material you use, you have to make the tzitzis out of the same material that you used for the garment. So if you have silk garment, you have to have silk tzitzis. If you have cotton garment, you have to have cotton tzitzis. 1 second, I have another pasuk that tells me that you're supposed to have wool or linen as the tzitzis. So 1 second, okay, so how does this work? The Gemara explains. If you're going to use tzitzis that's wool and linen, then that covers everything. That's like these one size fits all. This covers everything. Wool or linen tzitzis will exempt any garment. However, sharminim, if you're gonna have silk tzitzis, so b'minam paichim shleim paichim. Silk tzitzis will only work on a silk garment. They won't work on a wool garment or on a cotton garment.
Violating a negative prohibition in order to fulfill every opinion.
Well, yeah, over here there's a clear that if you have chelas, you're allowed to have wool and linen. The garment is linen. The blue wool, which has to be wool.
So I mean, I don't see why the garment itself can't be wool also. So there's no shot.
Right. Why is it that we don't say what Rava said before, Reish Lakish said before, that just make the garment out of wool, and then you're not violating. Rish Lakish said before that if you have an opportunity to fulfill both, then that's how you have to do it.
What does the Tchelis have to be wool?
I think
Is that
Tchelis
possible?
actually means blue wool.
Tchelis means blue wool, it's not
I think
just the
so.
color.
I think so. So what this opinion holds is that the Gedilim is teaching me not that I can use shatnez tzitzis. What it's teaching me is that Semeru Pishtim is allowed to be used to on any type of garment of tzitzis, even if it's silk or other thing, it will still work. So in other words, this opinion holds that I have to learn from Roshai to teach me that a positive command pushes off a negative command. I wouldn't be able to learn from Temero Pishtim because I learned from Temero Pishtim that you do that wool and linen is
Like a homework push off.
right. So here we're saying that it's not teaching me that a positive command pushes off a negative command. It's teaching me that you can use wool or linen to cover any garment for it. Okay. The one that said that Roshai teaches me that you're allowed to cut the payas, which means that a positive command pushes off a negative command. Where does he know that a Nazir that's a Mitzvah is allowed to cut his hair? He told me that Roshai only teaches me that he's allowed to cut the payas. Where does he know that you can push off a positive command as well? Because a Nazir growing his hair is a negative and a positive. He's not allowed to put a razor on his head, and he's also supposed to have his hair grow wild. It says, Nafkale Misakane. If you remember in that verse that we quoted, verse 9, it says, on the seventh day cuts off all his hair, his head. It's the hair in his head, his beard. Why does it have to say the beard? You already said all the hair. Well, first of all, why does it have to say the head? Well, that we took care of. That's either teaching me this or that or the other thing. What about the beard? Why does it have to mention the beard? It says, oh, the beard. But the beard is teaching me the Tanya Zakanik, because the Brisa says like this. It quotes the pasuk. It says the beard. Ma Talmud Leimer, why does it need to mention that? You already said that the Mitzvah has to cut all the hair in his body. Because it says in the pasuk, Pasukanam Leigalecho, you're not allowed to shave your beard. Yachal Afkayan Mitzvah. For some reason, the Gemara is quoting the pasuk that it says by a kohen that a kohen is not allowed to shave his beard. It says in two places. You're not allowed to shave your beard, and also says that a kohen is not allowed to shave his beard. So we're quoting the pasuk by the kohen. It says that a kohen is not allowed to shave his beard. Let's say he's a mitzayra. How does he cut all the hair on his body? He's not allowed to shave his beard. The pasuk says clearly that he has to shave his beard. Okay, so I have a source that says that he shaves his beard. I have a source that says that it pushes off a positive command. Now, what about it pushes off a negative command? What about the positive command? How do I know that the kohen growing his beard is a positive command? So that commentaries speak out because it says kadoshim yiyu, kadoshim tiyu. They should be holy. A kohen should be holy. So the laws of the kohen have a positive command that's attached to them. So therefore, not shaving his beard, which is a negative command, also has a positive. It says he should be holy. So therefore, the Mitzvah that's allowed to shave his beard is pushing off a positive and the negative and the positive. So you see, this person has a source. The one that uses Roshai to teach me that you're allowed to cut the payas. How does he know that he's also allowed to cut off here? That would be a negative and a positive command. It would be a violation of two things. So that we learned from Zakane, from the beard. Because the kohen that's a mitzvah would all be allowed to cut his beard, which would have a negative and a positive, which ultimately would mean that a nazir that's a mitzvah would also be allowed to, even though over there it's also a negative and a positive. But he doesn't use Roshai for that, like the other brisa. He uses the kani for that. Now the obvious question is, according to the other brisa that uses Reisha for that, what does he do with Zakanai? Goes like this. Man the mapik leila Reisha, lasi v'leisa say, one that says that Reisha teaches me a positive and a negative, leila Zakanai, let him learn from the beard. You have it from the beard. If he's the kayan, it's a positive and a negative.
When it says you shall be holy, that's
It's referring to not cutting the, or that may be a inclusive positive command that includes a bunch of those. Well, the Gemara says we can't learn from the kayan. I'll show you why. It says, in general, you know that we hold we never say that a negative command, a positive command should push off a negative and a positive. We never say that. We only say, never say never, but we only say that a positive command pushes off just a negative, but not a negative and a positive. So the problem is, why don't we learn from the kayan that he's allowed to? The kayan, we see that if he's a Mitzayra, we push off the laws of kayan so that he should cut his hair. That we see that a positive command has the strength to push off another positive and negative. The Gemara says, "Ela mikayan le'alfina." Obviously, you can't learn from a kayan.
Let's take a fundamental issue for a Kohen comment. There's a negative prohibition of him not, serving the basic things like that. So isn't the positive commandment of him to give korbanos and anything like that override that prohibition from being coming?
Yeah, so that I guess is not something that he has to do. He can have someone else do that. There's certain things that he has to do. Like he's a Mitzayra, he can't have someone else take a haircut. Right. He's got to do the haircut. So that's why it's imposed on him.
Okay, I see.
In a
Because
certain instance, the
that
person has
positive
to do.
commandment is imposed on all Kohanim, not
Right.
just
Right, and seeking it, someone else can do it. I guess it has to do with a mitzvah. Yuvis. It's an obligation to perform, not just if he does it, it's a mitzvah. Okay. And obviously the rule is that you can't learn from a kayan. You can't learn from a kayan. Why not? Because the rules of the kayan don't apply to everyone. If that's the case, so Nazir mikayan nami layalef. The Nazir let me just see what the Gemara means by this. Right. Give me a second before you jump into that. So the fact that you're allowed to push off the laws of a kayan, that would not tell me that a Mitzayra would be allowed to cut off his hair even though he's a Nazir. According to this opinion, we need to learn that from Reisha. So that's the strength of this opinion. We asked, according to the opinion that uses Reisha, what does he do with Tzakanai? He says, well, you see that you don't learn from a Kayan anyway. So if that's the case, you can't learn from the Kayan to teach me that the Nazir would be allowed to cut his hair. Use your pencil for a second. Okay, so let's see now. Oman Mukim Lahai Reisha bin Nazir Lamali Zakanai. Go the other way. So according to the one that has Reisha, he has everything that he needs. Reisha teaches me that the positive command pushes off the positive and the negative. What does he need Zakanai for? What does it have to say the beard? According to the opinion that said Reisha teaches me payas, so the beard taught me the positive and the negative of the kayan. But according to the one that says the head teaches me positive and negative of a Nazir. So what do I need Zakani for? Teach me a positive and negative. I already have positive and negative by Roshai for the Nazir. It says mi Kedetanya. It's a little confusing. I worked out most of this, because it's like a chart. I worked it out this morning to write everything down and see that this one says this one says that. Gotta work it out.
We have that chart.
It's not going to help you. I just wrote it down in 2 lines. Like this one, it's the process. It's not the result. So, we need it for another brisa. It says the kani, it says the beard. Why does it need to say that the Mitzvah cuts off the beard? Because they have another source that says you're not supposed to cut the beard. Yachal, this is by the Kayan. Yachal af Kayan Mitzvah kain. Maybe a Kayan that the Mitzvah should not cut his beard either. Comes to tell me that no, he does cut the beard. Okay. Minolan de Betar. How do you know that he cuts it, that he uses a razor when he does this? You were asking about. The Tanya, the Brisa says, it says that he's not supposed to shave off the beard, the corners of the beard. Maybe if he uses the scissors, it'll be a prohibition. It'll be get lashes. It says he's not allowed to destroy. And scissors doesn't destroy, it just trims. If it says he's not allowed to destroy, maybe if he pulls it out with the tweezer or a plane, so he's going to be chayiv. It needs to be cut, not pulled out. Now the problem is, what type of cutting is also destroying? That's only by a razor. Cuts it very close to the roots. Okay. The one that says that Reisha just teaches me that he's allowed to cut off the payas, because he's a Mitzayra. Why does it have to say both Reisha and Zakane? Why does it have to say the payas and the beard, the head and the beard? Yeah, what? Yeah, we mentioned this before. But is that what you had from 41?
Yeah.
Pretty good. Where's the trophies?
Oh, I have one.
So, why does it have to say Reisha and why does it have to say Zakanai? Gemara says, Mashma lemidche lav greda, mashma lemidche leisa sevasei. I would know, well, from Reisha. If a positive command pushes off a negative command, and it also pushes off a negative and a positive, so hilkach shakalu. So therefore, they're both equal. Why do I need to have 2 limudim if they're both equal? If I can push off a positive and a negative, I can push off also a negative. The Gemara says, "Kayan minazir layalef." Where was the nazir here? But which nazir were we dealing with? We didn't have a nazir according to this opinion. Kayan minazir layalef. Why? Shekin yeshnem b'shayla. I would have thought like this. I would have thought that the Kanai I think guess what it's saying is that I wouldn't have been able to know that a Nazir would be allowed to cut his hair because a Nazir has I'm sorry, even if a Nazir is allowed to cut his hair, I wouldn't be able to know that someone else is allowed, that a Kayan is allowed to cut his beard. Why? Because the Nazir has a special leniency. And that leniency is that you can always go to a Rav and be Mataneder, and you can take off the Nazirus. So you see, it's already a weak prohibition. And so the fact that the Mitzvah would be allowed to cut it is because that's anyways a weak prohibition. But that a Kayan should be allowed to cut his beard when he's a Mitzvah, that I wouldn't have known. Now I would have gone the other way. Nazir Mikayan Layal, if I wouldn't have known that a Nazir is allowed to cut his hair from a Kayan, because a Kayan is Shekain La'av Sheina Shava Bakal, because like we said before, that the rules of a Kayan only apply to a Kayan. That also tells me that it's a weaker prohibition. The Gemara says, and that's why, even though I have two exceptions here, that a Mitzvah is allowed to cut his beard, and that a Mitzvah is allowed to, a Mitzvah that's a Nazir is allowed to cut his hair, even though this is a positive command that's pushing off a positive and a negative, and in the rest of the Torah, we never say this. The reason why we don't say this in the rest of the Torah is because a Kayan has a special leniency, and a Nazir has a special leniency. And because of that, we don't say that a positive pushes off a negative in the rest of the Torah.
And therefore,
You can't learn from it to other places.
It's too peculiar a model,
Right.
too peculiar a situation. to be a model.
Okay.